So you know everything I said about the mushrooms, of how they're so great?
I lied.
Well, I found out mushrooms are evil and they are parasites. It's the fucking clicker apocalypse and these were trying to infect me. These going in the puppies. That's right. I just slayed them. You're probably wondering why I did that. Because I found out something very important about mushrooms. I was going to grow my mushroom farm. I was going to do everything. You should eat mushrooms. You should do. Well, she got in my way. Well, it turns out I found out where cancer comes from. So I've been studying all about mushrooms. I've been eating some. I tried the new ones arrived. I found something. I have found mushrooms are the origin of cancer. Cancer comes from mushrooms. So it's like, how could cancer come from mushrooms which have cancer-fighting properties? But then you learn there are different types of cancer. So it's not that they are anti-cancer, it's that there are different types of cancer, and they are very competitive. So if anything, the fact that it fights cancer means that it's even more aggressive as a form of cancer. I think mushrooms form a very dangerous type of cancer, and you should avoid them at all costs. Though the thing is that I found if you sterilize the mushrooms, it's so weak that it practically does nothing. It's when you eat it raw and organic that it's much stronger. So what I found from that is that I threw my mushrooms away and I feel better. Or do I? Or do I feel worse? Or do I not? Maybe it's a lie. You know what? I barely got any sleep last night. Maybe I'm just going mad. Maybe I should get the mushrooms back. But then, now that I think about it, I never needed them to begin with. So why would I feel like I need them? Because I don't. I should probably just stay away from them. So the reason I found out about the mushrooms with the cancer thing is because I started this from studying tree bark. And I realized people say that mushrooms have a symbiotic relationship with trees because they only eat the dead parts. But when I found that tree bark is like human skin, then I realized if something's eating your dead skin, that's not a symbiotic relationship. That's something just eating the outside of your skin because it's mainly comprised of like dead skin cells is the outside of your skin. So that's like eating the top layer of your skin and saying that's a symbiotic relationship, which is like, that's like a leech or a tick sucking the blood off of me and saying this is a symbiotic relationship, which carry Lyme disease. which I said could be rooted in like the root of all diseases, is Lyme disease. It's the same concept. A tick on you giving you Lyme disease, a mushroom. I think mushrooms are parasites, and I think they are too dangerous to get comfortable with them. I think they are very aggressive plants. Like, they're not really plants, they're not really animals. And because they live in their own, the kind of in between of not a plant or an animal, it makes them very dangerous because they're very intelligent, but also not understood at all. And I don't think they should be understood. I think people should stay away from them because I think mushrooms are parasites. You shouldn't even entice yourself by trying to understand them. You should just stay away from them. I realized is that mushrooms are bad. Mushrooms are bad. They are evil. Mushrooms are evil. They are evil creatures. And the thing is, I started listening to mushroom music, and I was like, how come when I'm listening to mushroom music, I just stopped listening to like everything else? And I feel like there's almost like a hive mind to the mushrooms. It's like you eat the mushrooms, and it just pulls you deeper and deeper into it. It's like all I do is mushrooms, and then it's like, I feel like it's almost like brainwashing you as like a living sort of being. It's like you become so connected to other mushrooms that you're just like, you're less of a person. It's like I'm realizing how dark this is. Is like I've been having like the mushrooms, and it's like, this isn't like kid stuff. This is really dark. Like, I'm making this video because I've never seen someone say this, and I feel like you should do this. It's like, if you have mushrooms, it's like, get them out of your house. Like, they're terrible for you. Like, they will kill you, I think. Mushrooms are very dangerous. So I threw mine away, as you could see. And I did that after rifing them because I was like, this should make mushrooms healthier. But then I realized, like, it's actually making it worse, I think. The mushrooms are worse, making me worse. So I'm getting rid of them. So it's kind of just like very off-putting with the mushrooms. It's like, it's not rifing in of itself, it's just choosing to rife mushrooms. It's like, if I rifed potatoes or like any other thing, then it's like, that would have been fine. It's just the mushrooms, because all the rife machine did was made it healthier. The reason I found out mushrooms were dangerous was because I made them healthier. And because of that, they actually had more capabilities to do things like act as a parasite. So I'm realizing, if you see a mushroom, it's like, destroy it. It's like, if you see a mushroom on a tree, like, smash it, like, get rid of it. Like, you should kill, like, destroy all mushrooms. It's like, mushrooms are bad. And I remember that as a kid, because I always smashed mushrooms when I was a kid. Like, my instinct was to do that. Like, when I was on a hike or about to mow the lawn or something, if I saw a mushroom, I was like, I need to smash that. That's like a fungus. So now it's like, I'm realizing mushrooms are evil. Stay away from mushrooms. And the point I was making with sterilizing them is like, if you sterilize them like with lab equipment and or with high acidity and things like that, they're so deneutralized or so neutralized because they're so malnourished that they can be edible, but they're still a hypothermic whatever food where it's like they burn more calories to eat it than they give you. And when a food does that, it's because it's a parasite. Like if it takes calories from you to burn it, it's because it's parasitic to your body. Because food should give you calories. That's what food does, is food gives you heat. If it takes heat from you, you shouldn't eat it. And that's what I learned. And I know this might be like frightening, but it's very simple. It's like, I think if you have eaten mushrooms, like you should use the Rife machine to Rife for fungi and parasites and cancer and things like that. But if you stop immediately, then I think you will be fine. I'm just finding it's kind of like the clicker apocalypse with mushrooms. It's like mushrooms are very dangerous. It's like I think they can take over your nervous system and your personality changes and you develop characteristics of like having a sort of symbiosis whatever with mushrooms. Like I've noticed since I've started eating them that for no reason at all, I just want to listen to mushroom music, and like I don't really even listen to mushroom music. It's like the music that mushrooms make. And it's like this feels very like wrong. Like I feel kind of like a hive mind with doing this, and it's very off-putting because like I'm very sensitive to frequencies. So I feel like mushrooms in a way are just making me act more radically than I did before I ate them. And it's very like, it's good and bad. It's one, I realize many of the issues I've been having have been related to, I think, like one thing that I realized, to go more extreme with the mushrooms, is that there are certain influences in my life that I found to be extremely toxic to me, like media and movies and shows that completely tore me off from, I think, my, from a direction that was good for me. And they were made by people who ate a very high amount of mushrooms. And I'm realizing that, you shouldn't just avoid mushrooms. You should also avoid influences of mushrooms. I don't mean like if someone does eat mushrooms, you should hate them. But if they produce works that are inspired by mushrooms, such as like the psychedelics, then I think you should avoid those works. And Midnight Gospel was something that was like that, where it's like I thought I really liked it, but at the same time, like, they had all these messages that feels like, I feel like it wasn't good for me. Like, I felt like what they were saying was true, but none of it actually helped my real life. And I'm realizing that just because I felt like it was true, even though it didn't really change anything in my life, it's like, it's not because it is true, it's just because people now note feelings of truth and love to just chemical reactions. When in reality, love and things, like there is more than chemical reactions. Like humans are more than just chemical reactions. Like chemical reactions are an after effect of like real spiritual things, like love and consciousness and truth. But the thing is that we live in an unhealthy world, so those things can exist without the accurate physical representation. So it's like someone can love you but not directly show it because they're not healthy. Or something, you could be right about something, but because you're not healthy, you don't explain it well, so people misinterpret it. So it's like, it's because of health, there are things keeping us from understanding things clearly. But one of the things is that people haven't adapted to that. It's like one of the problems I realize is we have all this disease and suffering, but people act like if something feels true, then it is. Or if I feel loved, then it is love. But they're part of the problem because they don't realize or teach to other people that things aren't as they seem. Is that actual results don't indicate intentions. And because of that, people are very unforgiving and also naive of how dark the real world is. So it's like shows like the Midnight Gospel, for example, can feel true, like can feel good, like feel like we have all these friendships or whatever, and that feel like we're all connected. But that's not true. Like we're all very disconnected, we're all very unhealthy. People don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. And if we feel that by watching certain things, such as media inspired by psychedelics, we should avoid those sources of media because it's not true, and we know it's not true. So if it makes us feel that way, then we know we're just getting high. And it's like when we say high, we don't mean like creative high. We mean like we're disembodied from the real world around us. And like that doesn't always happen when you are high. Like people, like Native Americans would smoke marijuana and things like that. And they used that to help them get connected to the world. So it's not being high in of itself. I think it's getting high on mushrooms that's dangerous, because mushrooms, they're not just like a dead thing when you're smoking them. It's like mushrooms I think are still alive when you eat them. It's like when you smoke them, it's like they're still alive. And you know how capable they are because they're capable of cloning. So it's like you only need a little piece and they can grow more mycelium. And it's like, I think that shows how dangerous they are, because you could eat a little piece of it and it actually, I think, grows as part of you instead of you eating it dying and then becoming part of you. I think when you eat a mushroom, it is trying to actually make you a part of it. And isn't that what cancer is like your own cells being hijacked against you? It's like, I feel like they do have a type of cancer that is very aggressive. It might be the most aggressive type. And I've just been watching these videos about mushroom farming and things like that, and I've noticed these people don't look healthy. All they talk about or do is mushroom related. So it's like two things. One, they don't look healthy. They don't act healthy. Two, all they do is mushroom related and get high on mushrooms. Like they don't do anything else. Like that's all they do. And three is, some of the other people I've seen, is that they use highly sterilized equipment and antibiotics that I think destroy your body. So it's like, how come mushrooms, which are supposed to be so healthy, why do they seem to attract so much, seem like death, by like the lack of everything else in someone's life, like the disconnection from reality? Like I think disembodiment from your reality is so dangerous, because that's exactly what the environment that parasites want you to have. is because if you're disembodied from your immediate surroundings, then a parasite can come in and just hijack it and control it to do whatever it wants to do. And isn't that what getting high is? So it's like, I think I'm realizing DMT and mushrooms, which has been described as like beneficial to people. It's like, I have very low DMT levels because I've never had mushrooms or anything like that. And I feel like even though I get sick easily, part of it is because I'm surrounded by sick people, a lot of sick people, not because I'm sick in of myself. And I think that DMT in of itself isn't good for people. It's like what I've learned about spirituality is that it should be separate from physicality. It's like they should be completely separate places, because when they're not, then you have things that many people don't like, which is like people praying but never doing anything, people talking but never doing anything, all of these ideas but never any real world change. It's like when you have too much spirituality in the physical world, then nothing happens. People just talk. And that's exactly what the world is like. It's like it's more spiritual than it's ever been, but they're not physical at all. Like there's no real physicality. Like you go anywhere, nobody's really doing anything but just watching TV and like on their phone, whatever. Like nothing's physical anymore. And it's because the world is trying to be too spiritual. And it's like what I've realized with the mushrooms is like DMT is said to be like this spiritual, by scientists, like this spiritual component. But they're scientists, so like they're not people who believe in spirituality. So why would they call it this spiritual compound if they're not spiritual people? And it seems ironic just because it's like they make it sound like it just seems so hypocritical of like, why would you call it they make it sound like it's a good thing, like, but at the same time they openly say they're not spiritual. But the thing is I kind of contradicted myself by saying that, of like people are too spiritual now, is they're referring to spiritual as in religious or like divinity with God. And just so you know, divinity is not spirituality. Like divinity is much higher on the hierarchy than spirituality. Spirituality is more just like music, theater, religion, but that's separate from God or angels and things like that. Spirituality is a much weaker force than divinity. But people now, so I'll say scientists classify DMT as like the divine substance, whereas I wouldn't call it that, even though they say it is, because I disagree with them. But I think people now are too spiritual, like down here, but they're completely against divinity. So you can be religious, be anti-religious as a form of religion, which ironically like is a religion, I think, to be anti-religious. And it's just, anyways, it's like DMT is like, I'm finding is, I think you should avoid that too. It's like, it's kind of upsetting for me because I spent a lot of time with the mushrooms and it's very dark to find this, but I haven't found this anywhere and I don't think anyone will. So I think this concept will allow you to think of the world differently, that you can go to the store where everyone's smiling and happy and everything, and they have a box, a mushroom kit, which I threw mine away, and you can get it, and it's organic, so it's like that seems healthier, so I'll get to that. And you try it, and you realize that by watching me tell you this, that you're just letting parasites into your home. And people don't even think anything about it. And the thing is about the United States is that they don't test for parasites. Like if you go to the hospital or anything, like the United States healthcare departments, they don't test for parasites unless you specifically ask them, is they don't. And I know that because I've had parasites and they told me I didn't have anything. So I have proof that that is true. I've heard that from people that they don't test for parasites, and I've also had parasites and they told me I didn't have any. So when you go to the doctor and they tell you you have nothing wrong, it's like you shouldn't think I have an incurable illness or something that can never be found. It could just be you have parasites because they don't test for them. And I know that firsthand experience. And mushrooms, it's like people are so naive now with organic foods or with nutrition now. It's like people are the most sick they've ever been with chronic illness. Like we have the most sterilized food and the most, in some cases, the most malnourishment than people have ever had in hundreds of years. And yet they act like now they know more than they ever have before, but they don't. And part of that is that nobody bothered to tell me that mushrooms are parasites until I found out myself. And I found that in a very controlled setting of my home with growing them. But if I didn't do these experiments, I would have never known about it. And you wouldn't know about it either if I didn't. And it's because of the Rife machine that I found out about that. By making mushrooms healthier, I found out that it makes me worse, my health worse, by making the mushrooms' health better. And it's because they're parasitic. So I'm realizing that if you have mushrooms or you see mushrooms, you should destroy them. Because mushrooms are parasites, and I think they should be extinct. And you think mushrooms can be used to remove plastic and toxic waste and things like that. It's like, yeah, I could see why that, like, you would want to do that, because you just get a bunch of fungi and then they eat plastic and radiation, because it's like, what else can we do about it? But at the same time, it is a parasite. So if you have this very large mass of a parasite and you give it a food source and give it a very powerful and numerous food source, then you have to think of how it, having a direct network to the rest of nature through mycelium, will affect the rest of the planet. So I can't offer another solution now, but I could say is that I think they're a parasite and a problem. And that I've read that mushrooms are kind of the network of nature, but at the same time, like the mycelium, maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe it's because it's acting as a parasite for nature. And that's why we don't have more animals, more natural environments, and so much death and decay in natural environments, is because of that. Mycelium is a major network of the forests. And I'm realizing now that with the lack of mushrooms in my area, because I was looking for them to get chicken of the woods, that for some reason, even when I didn't know definitively yet mushrooms were parasites, I felt relieved that I didn't find any. And I think it might be some form of divinity letting me know that this was the outcome that they wanted to tell me, was that they wanted to tell me that they found out that mushrooms are evil. They are dangerous parasites and should be exterminated. And nobody was willing to listen to it because people just think you can pluck something off of the ground and eat it and it's food. And I know that cooking something and it tasting good does not mean it's food. Like, I've ironed my underwear with, like, to clean it, and it smells like Pop-Tarts and donuts. It's like, that smells good. It's like, what is it? It's my underwear. It made of like inorganic, non-edible material. It's like a fabric. It's like, that's not food. Like, just because it tastes good doesn't mean it's food. Like, I've tasted like very inedible things and I thought, that tastes good. It's like, taste isn't just for eating, is what you'll realize. So just because something tastes good doesn't mean you should eat it. But I've also realized mushrooms tasted worse and worse to me as I've been eating them. And it feels like my body is developing an allergy to mushrooms. And it wouldn't have one yet because it's from a different country. So the pink oyster isn't a native one I would normally have. But I have had other mushrooms that were pearl oyster mushrooms, I think. I think so. And they were more sterilized, so they wouldn't have been as powerful. But I think I did have an allergic reaction to it. And the reason probably is that our bodies develop immunity to mushrooms. And for people who don't have problems with mushrooms after they keep eating them, I think that indicates an immune system in you, not for the people who can't eat mushrooms, but for the people who can. And I feel like increasingly over time, the idea of mushrooms, eating them, has made me more and more sick. So it's like I've increasingly not wanted to eat them. And the thing is, I made in my video before about how mushrooms look like things we want to eat, like bread and bacon. Like, it tastes like bacon, it tastes like chicken. But I'm thinking that if they are parasites, then wouldn't they want to taste good? It's like bait, just like bait 101 is like, you get it, you make it enticing. And the thing is that I think that the fact that mushrooms are the network of nature has an effect on things like the internet, which is heavily connected to nature because of nature is the earth itself. and the internet is communicated through signals in the air. So like cell phones, like it's interacting with nature, and like radio signals and electrical wiring underground where the mycelium is. And that I think mushrooms heavily represent sexual elements. And I think one of like the increasing amount of eroticism in American culture has to do with the increased effect of mushrooms. And one of the reasons is that mushrooms are some of the most ancient creatures on the planet. So they're very in tune with electrical firing. And you think of the wiring underground that connects us to the internet. And that's where the mycelium is. And you think if mushrooms are capable of producing music that is inaudible to the human ear, but is still being produced actively by them, like, and travels through the ground, then you think maybe they're hopscotching onto the internet, like the literal physical cabling itself underground, and actually trying to hijack it to use the internet to get people into eroticism, to actually feed their own energy. Meaning that erotic imagery, such as like pornography, or like sexual things with like Instagram or whatever that people post all the time, is actually a byproduct of mushrooms actually hijacking the internet itself by allowing themselves another medium to access more energy, which is metaphysical energy, which is something that people now don't even realize exists, is that we produce energy that can be seen by other animals, even people in some intuitive ways, and plants and mushrooms, that isn't a material object. And that's why the internet is so powerful. It's like we can have computer images that are just pixels, yet feel the same way we do with real life itself. And it's not because of just the literal images. It's also because of the metaphysical elements of life itself aren't created by material objects, which means like the reason a photograph on the internet can feel as real as you actually being there is because the metaphysical energy is the same. The physicality isn't, but the metaphysical element is. And that's how we base life itself on, is the metaphysical energy, which is the life that exists outside of the material world. So like the person there witnessing the photograph and taking it, or the view for the photograph and taking it. It's like that can still exist through a different timeline by using the internet. And I think mushrooms are actually interfering with that process as like radio disruptors. Of like somehow mushrooms, which are highly intelligent beings, and they're experts with those micro transactions of energy, with detecting them and producing their own sounds and hearing sounds, as you would know by people with microphones and using them to record conversations of mushrooms. And also that mushrooms can apparently learn dialogue, which I've watched some videos about that, is that they actually know like up to 50 words. So they're highly intelligent beings adapted for these little tiny transactions of electromagnetic energy. It's like something with like them having the capacity to hijack the internet to make it more based on porn and sexual imagery to actually feed on as a form of parasite, that seems like that could actually be a real thing. And I'm very concerned if it is. But at the same time, I think what I've been trying to do with the tree bark actually could help stop that. Is because if they're using the internet as a form of parasitic energy, then that means you could use the internet to kill them off.
Yeah.
So what that means is that I think with producing 3D modeling or 3D animation and doing the puppet making with tree bark, so like going back to the tree bark and working more with crops and things like that that also don't like mushrooms, where it's like potatoes, like they don't like fungi because it kills them. So it's like, if you'll notice, the substrates you'll use typically get killed off by the mycelium. And the reason is because it's not symbiotic, it's a parasitic or murderous relationship. So instead of using, what you can learn from mushrooms is that if you get what the substrate the mushroom would feed on, like if you got that substrate and incorporated it more into your own life directly, such as like tree bark, then I think it would make you and your life much healthier. It's like mushrooms love tree bark. I was going to use the tree bark as a substrate and said, I just consume some tree bark and I use it for my products, and I think I will feel much healthier. So it's like you can learn from mushrooms what to do, but they are not your friends. And the thing is like I was okay with that idea anyways, because I realized that when I heard sounds of mushrooms being plucked, like about to be eaten, they made like very frantic noises when they did that from like the microphone they were being recorded with. And I realized that you're like killing a living being by eating the mushrooms. So even if you do grow and eat them, you're already recognizing they're not your friend. Like the thing about nature with crops that's different, like with what I mean with plants, not mushrooms or animals, which are living beings. I think what I said in the previous video is my theory of plants is that they're already kind of dead. So what makes plants unique is that they're alive and dead at the same time. It's like they don't have a consciousness like I think mushrooms do, and diseases do, especially parasites. I don't think plants have a consciousness, which is why they're so closely linked to like Mother Nature, is because Mother Nature is just like a deity that has control over plants, but it's only because plants already do not have a consciousness. While mushrooms, I think, are completely independent because they do have a consciousness. And it's a very aggressive one, I think. And the problem is mushrooms are so intelligent that like you shouldn't try to like understand them, I think. I think it's too dangerous. I think you should just avoid them. And I thought about instead of growing potatoes because they're cheap and I could grow them. So it's like I never had to do mushrooms. It's just very weird how I suddenly just became all in with the mushrooms. Like I've done that before, but not at the same level I was going to with the mushrooms. I was talking about eating everything mushroom, eating this and that. It's like, it's just kind of dark thinking of if that was actually a result of a parasite. And the good thing though is that I found out about it fairly quickly and with no harmful effects. I ate very little mushrooms and the ones I did eat were very baked, so they'd be dead. And I won't ever buy another mushroom again. I'm keeping them completely out of my house. And anytime I see mushrooms at the store, I'm going to cringe, remembering how dangerous they are. And it's going to really bother me that no one else is probably going to realize it. Except people generally don't eat mushrooms. But if you think about it in like Japan, it's like, I was so drawn to Japan, but like mushrooms are a heavy part of that diet, like with Japanese food. And I thought that's what makes them so healthy. But I'm thinking maybe if they didn't have them, then they would be even healthier, because they already like have all these healthy foods. I know I'm stereotyping that like Japanese people are healthy, but based on what I've seen, many people in Japan have much healthier diets than American people. And I would say that even more for South Koreans, but they still eat a large amount of mushrooms. And I feel like part of the culture they have with like everyone thinks the same and does the same thing could be because of the large amount of mushrooms they have. Like if they removed mushrooms from as part of their culture, that they would be more independent like American states. So I'd hope that people would actually stop eating mushrooms. So the point is, I'll stop here. No more videos of me watering my mushrooms. And I hate mushrooms, and I hope they all die. So thanks for watching. And I really didn't want to make this video because it's so dark, but I have to say it because if they're dangerous, I have to say it. Even if you think I'm crazy or something, like you should know. Like you don't have to eat them. So even if it's like you're crazy, but mushrooms kind of creep me out now, that if they could, so I won't, then do that. You know, like even if you don't believe why, just don't eat mushrooms. Just don't. Like that's it. So I'm not even saying to replace it with something. It's like just don't eat mushrooms. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Don't ever eat mushrooms again. That's it. And that's it for this video. So bye. I think I'll make something less dark later today because it really changed the mood, because I'm really pissed at my mushrooms, but at the same time, this helps me so much with my own private research related to medical stuff of fighting parasites. And mushrooms seem to be like the worst of them. So maybe I could find foods that also hate mushrooms and kill mushrooms and incorporate more of those into my diet. But I'll look into that later because I'm going to go back to bed because I didn't get much sleep. So that's it, and bye.